My own son said, "You're not my responsibility anymore. Go find a shelter." After he drained my retirement account. My name is Elaine Crawford. I'm 67 years old, and I spent nearly 4 decades working as a school secretary in a small town in Iowa. I wasn't rich, but I was careful, save, planned. I dreamed of retiring peacefully, gardening, reading mystery novels, and maybe visiting a few national parks with my old college friends. I raised 3 children, Brian, Dana, and Luke. Their father, Thomas, died when they were still young. Luke was just 8. I was only 37 when I became a widow. I still remember the day he collapsed on our front lawn while raking leaves. A heart attack at 42. Just like that, I became mom and dad, nurse and provider. I never remarried. I didn't have time. I poured myself into raising those kids right. Brian, my oldest, was always the responsible one. He got straight A's, went off to college on a partial scholarship. Dana was my only daughter, spirited, artistic, sometimes moody. Luke, he was my baby. He was tender, affectionate. He used to fall asleep clutching my hand, even at 9 years old. I thought we were close. I thought I was doing everything right. I cooked, cleaned. I worked overtime. I skipped meals so they could have seconds. I gave them my everything. When Brian needed help with tuition in his final year, I took out a small personal loan. When Dana couldn't make rent during her finding herself years in New York, I wired her money I didn't really have. And when Luke was trying to launch his graphic design business, I gave him access to my home computer, and later my bank card to help him get on his feet. I told myself it's what mothers do. They give. I never asked for anything in return. Not even a thank you most days. Just knowing they were okay. That was enough. Or so I thought. It started with little things. Calls unanswered. Texts ignored. Birthdays where I'd sit by the window, dressed and ready, and no one showed up. I'd excuse it all. They're busy. They have their own lives. But when I started getting strange overdraft notifications, I knew something was wrong. I hadn't touched my retirement savings in over a year. I kept it in a separate account, one I'd set up decades ago, intended for my golden years. But when I logged in one night, my hands trembling, the balance read, $143.09. Over $160,000. Just vanished. At first I thought it had to be fraud. I called the bank in a panic. They confirmed the withdrawals had been authorized. One by one in large chunks. Transfers, purchases, cash advances. All from familiar IP addresses. One even from my own home. I felt a cold sweat break across my back. My knees buckled. Had to sit down. I didn't want to believe it. I couldn't believe it. But the next morning I confronted Luke. I asked him gently at first, "Sweetheart, do you know anything about my savings account? I noticed some odd transactions." He didn't look me in the eye. Then with a scoff he said, "Yeah, I used some of it. You weren't doing anything with it anyway. And I told you I needed help." Froze. "Some of it," I whispered. "Luke, there's less than $200 left." He shrugged. "I had to pay back some guys. And the business didn't take off. Things happen." I couldn't breathe. I felt like my lungs had been crushed. This was my son. My baby boy. I reached for my phone and called Brian. He didn't pick up. I texted Dana. She read it but never responded. The silence, the wall, the void. It crushed me more than the theft itself. Within days, all 3 of my children had blocked my number. I sat alone in my house, the one I'd kept for all these years so they'd have a place to come back to. Now the walls felt hollow. Every corner haunted by memories that suddenly felt like lies. I tried emailing, writing letters. I even drove to Dana's apartment in Chicago. She wouldn't buzz me in. Her roommate said she wasn't home. But I saw her shadow peek behind the curtain. I stood on that sidewalk, clutching the letter I'd written in trembling hands, and I cried. Not loud. Just tears slipping down like quiet betrayals. My friend Marcy begged me to report it. "That's elder abuse, Elaine. It's theft. They can go to jail." But how do you send your own son to jail? How do you report the children you gave everything for? I stayed silent. Instead, I began pawning things. My wedding ring. Some antique dishes from my grandmother. Cancelled cable. I started going to the food pantry. The shame, it was unbearable. I didn't want my neighbors to know. I was the PTA mom. The one who brought cupcakes to school, who never missed a conference. Now I was rationing cereal and turning off the heater at night. And yet, I still hoped they'd come back. That one of them would call. That Brian, the responsible one, would apologize. That Dana would send me a card. That Luke would realize what he'd done and make it right. Weeks passed. Then months. Christmas came. I set up the old tree. Just in case. I baked snickerdoodles. Wrapped a few small gifts. No one came. No calls. No letters. Just silence. Then, in January, the final blow came. My mortgage company informed me the reverse mortgage Luke had convinced me to sign had ballooned. The house I thought was mine was no longer. He'd used my signature, telling me it was just for a refinance. I hadn't read the fine print. I trusted him. Now they were taking my home too. I remember sitting on my front steps as the sun set behind the bare trees. Everything felt still. As if the world had decided to stop spinning. My heart was hollow. My savings gone. My family gone. My house, no longer mine. That was the moment I realized. This wasn't just neglect. This wasn't just bad luck. This was betrayal. And it wasn't going to stop until I stopped it. He said, "If you're so desperate, go find a shelter. I'm not your ATM." And then he hung up on me. After the mortgage letter came, I sat in my silent kitchen for hours. The house creaked around me. Walls that once echoed with laughter now heavy with memories I could barely stand to remember. The soft tick of the clock was the only sound. Even that felt cruel. Time moving forward when I felt stuck. Called Luke one last time. Rang twice. Then it went to voicemail. "Luke. Sweetheart, I just need to talk. I got a letter about the mortgage. I think there's been a misunderstanding. I'm not angry. I need help. Please. Call me back." He never did. 2 days later I went to the bank in person. I sat across from a young woman. She couldn't have been older than 25, while she clicked through my account history. I felt like I was watching my own autopsy. Line after line, withdrawal after withdrawal, all approved. All with my name. I asked her how that could be. She pulled up a document. A digital signature I didn't remember signing. It was authorized electronically, she said. Via the linked email and phone number. Luke had set that up for me. Years ago. To make things easier, Mom, he'd said. He made it easier, all right. Easier to bleed me dry. I didn't remember walking back to the car. I only remember the cold steering wheel and how my fingers trembled when I gripped it. My body was shaking so hard I couldn't even turn the key. I sat there crying into my palms while people walked past me like I was invisible. When I got home, I looked around and made a list of everything I could sell. The vintage sewing machine. The leather recliner. My jewelry. By the end of the week, strangers had come through my home like scavengers, picking at my life one piece at a time. I was barely scraping by on Social Security. And even that wasn't enough. The utilities were overdue. My car insurance was cancelled. I started eating one meal a day, just toast or instant soup. I tried contacting Brian again. I found a work number and called from a different phone, hoping he'd answer. He did. "Brian," I said, relief flooding me just hearing his voice. "It's Mom." Silence. "Please," I whispered. "I need to talk to you." What do you want, Mom?" he cut in sharply. "I told you before. I'm not getting involved in Luke's mess." "Mess?" I asked, my voice cracking. "Brian, he used my name. He took everything. I don't even have enough for food. I'm going to lose the house." He sighed like I was an inconvenience. "Then maybe you shouldn't have given him access to your accounts. You're the one who set this up. Actions have consequences." "I trusted him," I said, barely able to get the words out. "Well, that's your problem, isn't it?" And then he hung up. I sat in that quiet, empty room, and I think a part of me broke. Something inside me went cold. Like the last candle had burned out. My own son, the one I held through his nightmares, the one I drove to every soccer practice, was treating me like a burden. I checked my email later that night. A single message from Dana. The subject line said, "You need to stop." It read, "Mom, we all told you not to play favorites. You gave Luke everything and now you want us to clean up the mess. We're not responsible for your bad decisions. Please stop calling. This is harassment." I read it over and over again. Favorites. I'd bent over backwards for all of them. I gave Dana thousands when she flunked out of art school. I covered Brian's wedding when his in-laws backed out. I never once said no. And now I was a pariah. A ghost with a begging bowl. I started researching shelters. That's how low things had gotten. A 67-year-old woman, who spent her entire life working and giving, now looking for a place to sleep where she wouldn't be cold or afraid. Marcy, my friend from church, noticed something was off. She stopped by unannounced one day. She saw the bare living room, the sagging cardboard boxes, the dark circles under my eyes. She didn't ask questions. She just sat next to me, took my hand and said, "Elaine, you don't have to go through this alone." But I did feel alone. Because the people I loved most had turned me into a stranger. No worse. They'd made me feel like a mistake. I stayed with Marcy for a week after the bank finally repossessed my house. I left behind the rose bushes I planted with Thomas. The attic full of old yearbooks and report cards. The porch swing where I used to read with Dana on lazy summer evenings. They didn't even ask where I'd gone. Not one of my children reached out. Not for my birthday, not for Easter. Not even when Marcy posted on Facebook asking if anyone had room for a displaced senior woman. I saw Dana's name on that post. She'd liked a picture of a beach just an hour later. She knew. She just didn't care. The weight of that truth. It sat heavy in my chest, pressing down like a stone I couldn't dislodge. That's when Marcy gave me a folder. "I've been gathering some things," she said gently. Inside were printouts, bank statements, property records, emails. She talked to someone at the legal aid office. She even found a lawyer willing to take a look. It was the first time I felt something other than grief. Felt anger. Real sharp, blistering anger. Not just at what had happened but at myself. For staying silent. For covering for them. For believing they'd come back. They wouldn't. And I finally saw that. These weren't my children anymore. Not in any way that mattered. They were opportunists. Users. Cowards. And it was time I stopped waiting for them to fix what they'd broken. I looked at Marcy, tears in my eyes, and said, "I want to fight back." She squeezed my hand. "Then let's do it." That night, I opened a brand new email. One they didn't know. I started documenting everything. I wrote down dates, amounts, every insult, every receipt, every lie. I wasn't just a helpless old woman anymore. I was a mother betrayed, and I was done being silent. When I posted my story online, Brian sent me a cease and desist letter. As if I was the criminal. The day I decided to stop being quiet was the day I remembered who I used to be. Before the bills. Before the betrayal. Before motherhood turned into servitude. I was once a woman who ran the PTA, who balanced checkbooks by hand, who knew how to stretch $1 into a meal and still leave room for dessert. I was resilient. I had survived losing a husband, raising 3 kids alone, and working 12-hour days without ever asking anyone for help. I had let myself forget that woman. Grief had buried her. Love had softened her. But betrayal had brought her back. With Marcy's help, I filed a police report. The officer looked sympathetic but cautious. "It's tricky when it's family," he said. "Unless we can prove fraud or coercion, it'll be tough." I told him I had emails, text messages, bank records. He nodded, but I could see doubt in his eyes. I was just another sad case. An old woman caught up in a family mess. So I went to the local courthouse and requested a consultation with a pro bono attorney. That's where I met Melissa Cartwright. She was younger than I expected, mid-30s, sharp eyes, no-nonsense demeanor. "I want to sue my son," I told her, my voice trembling. She didn't flinch. "Then let's figure out how." We went over everything. Every withdrawal Luke had made. Every gift I never agreed to. Every form he'd digitally signed for me. Melissa explained that while family financial exploitation was hard to prosecute, we might have a shot under elder abuse statutes. I couldn't believe that word applied to me. Older. But that's what I was now. A vulnerable senior who had been manipulated, used, discarded. Melissa said, "If nothing else, we can freeze his accounts and subpoena the mortgage paperwork. At the very least, we can make it stop." And that was what I needed. For it to stop. I didn't tell anyone else what I was doing. Not at first. I was afraid. Afraid they'd mock me. Dismiss me. Say, "You raised them this way." Or worse, tell me to forgive. But the silence was killing me, so I took a risk. One night, alone in Marcy's spare bedroom, I posted my story anonymously on a popular online forum for seniors. I titled it, "My children stole my retirement and left me homeless." I wrote every detail. The trust, the betrayal, the calls that went unanswered, the bank account drained dry, the house taken, the loneliness, the shame. I didn't expect much. But by morning it had gone viral. Thousands of comments. Messages from people I didn't know, all saying the same thing. This happened to me too. I gave my daughter power of attorney and she emptied my savings. My son promised to pay back a loan. He never did. My grandkids don't even know my name anymore. "You are not alone." I cried reading every word. For the first time in months I felt seen. Validated. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't imagining things. This was real. And it wasn't my fault. The post spread. A small local news site picked it up. Then a larger senior advocacy group shared it. Before long, people in my town started talking. Whispering. Some were supportive. Others judgmental. But I didn't care anymore. What hurt the most, though, was what happened next. Brian emailed me, for the first time in almost a year. Not to apologize. Not to check if I was okay. He accused me of slandering the family. He wrote, "You're embarrassing yourself and damaging our reputations. If you don't take down that post, I will have no choice but to pursue legal action for defamation." I stared at the screen in disbelief. Reputation. He was worried about his reputation. After everything they'd done. I forwarded the email to Melissa. She laughed. "He doesn't have a leg to stand on," she said. "Truth is a defense." Still, it hurt. It all hurt. Even now, part of me still wanted him to say, "I'm sorry, Mom. I was wrong." But that apology would never come. I decided to go public. For real. I attached my name and photo to the next post. I told my story in my own words and offered to speak at a local senior center. Then another. And another. I started getting invited to panels. Online interviews. Podcasts. They called me brave. But I didn't feel brave. I felt broken, held together by thread and fury. Dana texted me after my first video interview aired. "You really want to drag the family name through the mud? What will Grandma think if she sees this?" I stared at the message for a long time. Then I wrote back for the first time in months. "Grandma would have told you to apologize and help me pack. She raised better than this. Or so I thought." She never responded. But strangers did. One woman in Oregon offered me a place to stay. A retired nurse in Kansas sent me a grocery gift card. A man in Florida mailed me a letter saying I gave him the courage to finally confront his own daughter. I wasn't alone anymore. The legal case was still ongoing. Luke hadn't responded to any of the court summons. He'd moved, apparently. But Melissa was persistent. We'd managed to freeze one of his accounts before he vanished. It wasn't much, but it was something. I wasn't doing this for money anymore. I was doing it because someone had to. Someone had to say, "This is not okay." Someone had to show that even if you've been knocked down, betrayed, discarded, you can rise again. At night I still missed them. My kids. Not the people they were now, but the versions I remembered. The little boy who gave me a macaroni necklace. The girl who used to sneak into my bed during thunderstorms. The teenager who asked for my advice before his first date. But they were gone, and I was learning to let them go. One night, as I was organizing my paperwork, I found a card at the bottom of an old box. It was from Luke. Dated nearly 20 years ago. A Mother's Day card. It said, "To the best mom in the world. I'll never stop thanking you for all you do. One day I'll take care of you the way you always took care of me." I held it in my hands, reading it over and over, tears falling onto the paper. That promise had been broken. But I hadn't. Not anymore. He showed up at the shelter and said, "You did this to yourself. Don't blame us for your mistakes." I nearly collapsed when I saw him. By the time winter came around, I was living in a transitional housing unit in the basement of an old church. It was clean, quiet, and humble. Twin bed. A shared bathroom. A small lamp by the nightstand where I'd started writing again. Mostly thoughts I never said out loud. Things I was afraid to forget. I was still speaking out. The videos had picked up traction. One had over 100,000 views. People called me brave, a warrior, even an inspiration. But all I ever felt was cold. Cold from the betrayal. Cold from the silence. Cold from the fact that not one of my children had come to see me. Not even to yell. Until Luke showed up. It was just after breakfast. I was washing my cup in the communal kitchen sink when someone called my name. I turned and there he was. Luke, my son. The boy I had once held to my chest, skin to skin. The man who took my name and burned it. He looked tired, pale, wearing a suit that hung loose like he hadn't eaten right in weeks. Froze. "What are you doing here?" he asked. He smirked. "Thought I'd see how the martyr's doing." I was speechless. He walked toward me casually, like we were at a barbecue, not in the bottom floor of a shelter where I now lived because of him. "You made quite the spectacle online," he said. "You enjoying the attention." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You stole my life," I whispered. "You took everything. And now you're angry that I told the truth." He scoffed. "Oh please. You gave it. You always gave me money. What's the difference now?" "The difference?" I stepped back. "The difference is that I didn't agree to let you forge my name. I didn't ask to be homeless. I didn't raise a son to be this cold. You think you're the victim," he said louder now. "You always favored me. Then you turned on me because you couldn't manage your own finances." I looked him dead in the eyes. "Get out." He paused. For a split second I saw something. Regret. Shame. Maybe. But it passed. He turned around, laughing bitterly. "You did this to yourself. Remember that." And just like that he left. I slid down the kitchen wall and sobbed into my hands. One of the volunteers tried to comfort me, but I couldn't speak. I felt like my soul had been shattered into 1,000 jagged pieces. The last time I had seen Luke in person, he was hugging me goodbye at my birthday lunch. I had given him $2,000 for a business opportunity. He kissed me on the cheek and said, "Love you, Mom." That memory haunted me. That night I couldn't sleep. Kept replaying it all. Every lie. Every promise. Every time I said yes because I thought I was being a good mother. The next morning I met with Melissa. I told her what happened. She looked furious. "He came here. That's intimidation. I can file for a restraining order." But I wasn't afraid of Luke anymore. I was something else now. I was angry. And determined. We pushed the case forward. Melissa filed motions, served subpoenas. Luke was finally forced to respond. He hired an attorney, a smug man who tried to make me out to be a confused old woman who'd misremembered the nature of her gifts. But I had receipts, emails, bank records, and one damning voicemail where Luke bragged about finally getting paid back for all the years he struggled. The judge didn't smile during the hearing. She was cold, stern, and sharp. But when she looked at me, her eyes softened. By the end of the preliminary hearing, Luke's lawyer was squirming. The judge set a trial date and strongly advised both parties to settle. Luke refused, and I was glad. I wanted to speak. I wanted the whole courtroom to hear what he had done. The weeks leading up to the trial were a blur. I had no home, but I had a voice. I was invited onto a daytime talk show. I gave a speech at a women's community center. A local politician even reached out to consult with me on elder protection policy. But nothing compared to what came next. One afternoon I received a letter from Brian. Not an email. An actual letter. Inside, his handwriting trembled across the page. "Mom, I saw the news clip. I didn't know it had gone this far. Sorry. I was wrong. I didn't believe you, and I should have. I should have stood by you. I failed you, and I don't expect you to forgive me. But if there's any part of you that still remembers the brother who cried when Dad died and the son who used to sneak you chocolates from the kitchen, I'm still that person. Somewhere. And I miss you." I stared at the page for a long time. And I wept. It wasn't everything. It wasn't justice. But it was something. The trial date drew near. The media caught wind of it. A David and Goliath story of a mother suing her own son. People took sides. Some called me brave. Others said I was bitter. But I didn't care anymore. I wasn't doing it for the court of public opinion. I was doing it for me. For the woman who stayed up every night sewing costumes for school plays. For the woman who skipped her own dinners to make sure her kids ate. For the mother who gave everything and asked for nothing. The trial was scheduled for spring. A year after I lost everything. And I planned to walk into that courtroom with my head high, my spine straight, and every ounce of strength I had left. Because I wasn't just a mother anymore. I was a survivor. And the world was finally listening. When I stepped into that courtroom, Luke wouldn't even look at me. But I looked him straight in the eyes. I needed him to see what he had done. The courthouse was colder than I imagined. Sterile walls, polished tile floors, and that smell, like paperwork and coffee and years of silence. It reminded me of hospital waiting rooms. Places where you sat and waited to find out if you were going to lose something. Melissa met me outside, her briefcase in one hand, the other resting gently on my shoulder. "You don't have to speak today," she said softly. "We can keep it factual. Let the evidence speak." "No," I told her. "I have to say it. I've been quiet too long." Inside, I sat in the front row behind the plaintiff's table. Luke was already there, flanked by his attorney, looking every bit the polished professional he pretended to be. Slick suit, pressed tie, jaw clenched. But I could see it in his eyes. He was nervous. But the trial started with basic testimony. Bank records. Paper trails. Melissa walked the court through each transaction, showing how Luke siphoned off funds from my accounts, transferred them into his, used my name to co-sign loans, and even refinanced the house without my consent. His attorney objected to everything. Claimed I was mentally declining, that I'd gifted the money out of love, that I was just confused. The judge wasn't having it. Then it was my turn. I stood up. My knees trembled slightly, but I held firm. "I'm not confused," I said. "I'm hurt." Luke still wouldn't meet my gaze. "I worked for over 40 years, I continued. Raised 3 children on my own. Never once asked for a thing in return. I didn't take vacations. I didn't buy myself new clothes. Save. Every spare dollar I had went to them." I paused to steady my breath. The courtroom was silent. And when it was finally time to rest, when I thought I'd grow old with some peace, they didn't just take my money. They took my home, my security, my dignity. Now Luke looked at me. But I trusted my son. I gave him access thinking he'd help. Instead, he bled me dry and left me sleeping in a cot beneath a church. I turned to the judge. "I'm not here for revenge. I'm here to take back what's mine, and to remind every person in this courtroom that love is not a blank check." When I sat down, I could hear someone sniffle in the back row. Melissa smiled at me, eyes glistening. Luke's attorney tried to twist things in cross-examination. Asked if I'd ever said yes to helping my kids. I told him the truth. I always said yes because I thought love meant saying yes. But not anymore. The judge took a week to deliberate. A long, aching week where I barely slept and every sound made me jump. And then, it happened. We returned to the courtroom for the verdict. Luke didn't speak to me. Not even a glance. But I watched him shift in his seat as the judge read aloud her decision. Based on the evidence presented and the testimony heard, I find in favor of the plaintiff, Elaine Mathers. The court orders full restitution of misappropriated funds in the amount of $186,000, the rescinding of the unlawful mortgage refinancing, and an immediate freeze on the defendant's personal assets. The air left my lungs. 1. Melissa gripped my hand so tightly I thought we might both fall over. But I didn't cry. Not yet. I looked at Luke one last time. His face was pale, blank, and I realized something I didn't expect. I didn't feel joy. Felt grief. Because even in victory, I had lost something that would never return. But I stood up, walked out, and felt sunlight hit my face like a blessing I hadn't felt in years. That night Marcy made a small dinner. Just the two of us and a bottle of cheap red wine. She held up her glass and said, "To the woman who stood up, spoke out, and didn't let them win." I clinked her glass and whispered, "To the woman who remembered who she was." The following days were a blur of phone calls and letters. Journalists, advocacy groups, even a law school class asked me to speak about financial elder abuse. One message hit me harder than all the rest. It was a voicemail from Dana. "Mom, I saw the news. I don't know what to say. I was wrong. I should have helped. I miss you." I didn't know how to respond. I didn't even know if I wanted to. But the ice in my chest had begun to melt. Just a little. As part of the restitution, I was awarded a portion of Luke's property sale. He was forced to sell the house he stole from me. Poetic in a way. With that money, I bought a small cottage just outside of town. A one-bedroom with a garden, a porch swing, and a view of the hills. Peaceful. Completely, irrevocably mine. I planted flowers. Painted the front door a bright blue. Adopted a rescue dog named Penny. And for the first time in years, I slept through the night. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was the storm they didn't see coming. My daughter said, "You got your money back. What more do you want?" Said peace. The kind you can't steal or fake. The blue door creaked in the morning breeze as I stepped out with Penny trotting beside me. She had a limp when I adopted her. A small thing with crooked legs and the softest ears you've ever touched. We were a perfect match. Two creatures carrying invisible wounds. Every morning we'd walk down to the edge of the neighborhood trail. I'd bring my thermos of tea, and she'd chase leaves like they were treasure. Sometimes I'd see other walkers, older folks like me. Some recognized me. Few whispered. But many stopped to talk. "I saw your story," one woman said once, eyes wet. "You gave me the courage to say no to my own daughter." Another man shook my hand and told me he'd hidden his finances for the first time in 10 years. Just in case. I never imagined my name would matter to anyone. But somehow my pain had reached people I'd never met. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel invisible. One afternoon I got a knock on the door. I opened it and saw Dana standing there. She looked smaller than I remembered. Her eyes were swollen like she'd been crying for days. She clutched a paper bag like a child bringing a peace offering. "Can we talk?" she asked. I hesitated, then stepped aside. She came in slowly, glancing at the cozy living room, the bookshelf I'd filled with poetry, the knitted throw blanket on the couch. She sat down like the cushions might reject her. "I brought muffins," she mumbled. "Lemon poppy seed. Your favorite." I nodded but didn't touch them. "I was so mad when you sued Luke," she began. "I thought you were just trying to ruin everything." I said nothing. But then I read everything. Watched your interviews. Looked at the bank records. I didn't know it was that bad, Mom. I didn't want to believe it because that would mean I was part of it too. She began to cry. And for once, I didn't rush to soothe her. Because I needed her to feel it. Every bit of it. "I'm sorry," she said. "I should have protected you." I looked at my daughter, not as a child but as a grown woman, broken by her own cowardice. And I saw a flicker of the girl I once held when she scraped her knees. The one who used to leave sticky notes on my fridge that said, "I love you, Mommy. I forgive you," I said softly. "But I'm not going back." She looked confused. "I'm not going back to being the mom who fixes everything, covers the bill, swallows her tears. If you want a relationship with me, it's going to be as equals. You'll have to earn my trust." Dana nodded slowly, biting her lip to keep from crying again. "I want that. I really do." I didn't say yes. Not yet. But I let her stay for tea. And when she left, she hugged me. Not out of guilt, but from something that felt real. Few weeks later, Brian visited too. He brought a potted orchid and a letter he'd written by hand. We talked for hours, laughed a little, cried more than I expected. He apologized for believing lies and for letting his silence be a weapon. "I thought loyalty meant staying quiet," he said. "But I see now, it just made me a coward." I took his hand. "You're here now. That means something." As for Luke, I never heard from him again. Not a word. His assets were seized. His name was blacklisted in some business circles. Last I heard, he moved across the country. I don't hate him, but I will never open my door to him again. Sometimes the deepest healing comes not from reunion, but from release. I started a small group in my town. Just 6 of us to start. We called it the Second Wind. A place for women over 50 to talk, vent, learn how to guard their hearts and finances, and most importantly, remember who they are beyond mom, wife, or helper. We meet every Thursday. There's tea, cookies, and truth-telling. One of the women, Gloria, said something that stuck with me. "We've spent decades pouring into others. Maybe now it's time we become the garden we grow." That line sits on a plaque in my living room now. Every night before bed, I write one thing I did for myself. Walk, book, a nap without guilt. The smallest things that used to feel selfish. They feel sacred now. I never got my old life back. But I found something better. Found myself. There are still days I ache. Days when I wonder what could have been if my children had just chosen love instead of entitlement. But I don't live in that ache anymore. I live in peace. A peace I planted with shaky hands and watered with tears. But that blooms now, stronger than ever. So if you're listening to this and you feel like your voice doesn't matter, like your kindness was used as currency and now you're empty, I want you to hear me clearly. You are not broken. You are not disposable. And it's never too late to say, enough. I said it at 68. And I'm just getting started.